Some women are so cold, so brutal. They don't need an excuse to murder. They kill anyone who gets in their way. A Florida wife turns a misdemeanor into murder.
She was an evil woman, a threat to anybody who crossed her.
A teenager lives out her morbid fantasies.
She wanted to see the light in her eyes go out.
And a crime of fashion ends in bloodshed.
The person who gets picked to be the victim of a crime happens to be the person that's walking at the wrong place at the wrong time.
These deadly women choose their victims at random. They steal lives for no good reason. The police are there to serve and protect.
What occurs is any police officer's worst nightmare.
Every day they risk their own lives to keep others safe.
Stand against the car, man.
It only takes one well-placed bullet to kill someone.
But who looks out for them?
She should not be in jail. She should have been put to death.
Confrontations are part of 25-year-old Andrea Hicks Jackson's everyday life. And her drinking problem in the 1980s isn't helping the Florida wife.
Alcohol released Andrea's inhibitions, and when she was drunk, she was a terror.
Her domestic life with husband Sheldon is volatile.
Yo, I'm drinking. Yo, come on, get up. Get your hands off me.
But Andrea has little trust in men. They bring back bad memories.
Andrea was raped at the age of 10, badly enough to be hospitalized, and she never got the psychiatric care she needed. From that moment forward, Andrea was looking for someone to pay for that crime.
29-year-old beat cop Gary Beville is well respected among his peers.
Hey man, how are you doing? Good. You guys heard about the new community center? Finished yet?
Gary Beville was the type of person that anybody who met him just automatically loved him. He was a great man, very caring, just went out of his way to help people.
You guys should go and check it out, okay? Check it out, right? Sounds good. Hey guys.
He was very well liked in his community, very active in programs for children, very liked throughout the department. I mean, he was an outstanding officer, and he was an officer that everybody else looked up to.
Car troubles are an everyday problem. But it's enough to send the volatile Andrea over the edge. On May 16th, 1983, two very different lives will collide over this everyday problem.
When Andrea flew into a rage, it was a blind rage.
Andrea Jackson actually smashed the heck out of her car, the windows and everything, because she was mad because the place she had bought the car from would not fix the car. And so she decided, well, what the heck? I'm just going to demolish it, and then it'll be somebody else's problem.
She causes the damage, but she wants the insurance company to pay for it. So Andrea calls the police and blames local thugs. Officer Beville is on the night shift when he gets the call.
Should have said the last word.
14 minutes, 25 on check.
I mean, I have to take this, huh? I'll be back. Yes, I'm on my way.
The call that Officer Beville received was just a routine call. That's why nothing really got him scared, or he wasn't in fear of anything happening. It was just a routine call that every officer responds to hundreds, millions of times.
Officer Beville, 20-month rookie, rolls up on the scene, finds a car with windows broken out, and starts interviewing Andrea Hicks Jackson, who says she's the owner of the car.
Somebody smashed my car.
Andrea sticks to her lie that local thugs wrecked her ride. Officer Beville has no reason not to believe her. He allows her to go into her house to get her car registration. What Officer Beville doesn't know is Andrea has been in trouble before with the law.
Andrea Hicks Jackson did have a criminal history involving drugs and other assorted crimes.
Andrea had been in trouble, but they were non-violent crimes, mostly misdemeanors.
The last thing Andrea wants is to go back to jail. She will do anything to stay out.
Now, before she came downstairs, we had a witness who described her, Andrea Hicks Jackson, as putting a gun in her waist and walking down the stairs.
She did it. I saw the whole thing. She said this is her car.
Before Andrea returns, a neighbor comes forward.
She was smashing up that glass in the trunk and all that.
Neighbors came forward and said, we actually observed Andrea Hicks Jackson demolish the car. The person that you need to be looking at is Andrea Hicks Jackson.
Officer Beville believes the neighbors and not Andrea. He's convinced she's made a false statement.
When Hicks Jackson comes back, Officer Beville apparently informs her that she is now going to be cited for filing a false police report and starts trying to bring her back to his police cruiser. She starts struggling with him.
It's exactly what Andrea doesn't want to happen. Now she has to make a big decision.
Andrea Hicks Jackson was such a mean and evil person that she didn't want to go back to jail no matter what. And she was going to take whatever steps necessary to ensure that.
You made me drop my case. Where your keys? You found my keys.
1983, Jacksonville, Florida.
Somebody smashed my car.
Can you prove this is your car?
Rookie police officer Gary Beville questions 25-year-old Andrea Jackson over her wrecked car.
You have some ID?
Yeah? Why?
Can you go and get it for me?
She claims vandals have done it. But Officer Beville knows the truth.
She'd been caught. She'd been caught in a lie. She'd been caught vandalizing her car. She'd been caught lying to this police officer. She was in trouble. She knew she was in trouble. What makes it even worse is that she leaves to go get her identification, and she returns with a gun. So now what's going through her head? Why would she bring a gun back down to an incident where she had vandalized a car? So now she's thinking in advance, I'm not going to jail.
Stand against the car, man. You are under arrest.
Officer Beville attempts to arrest Andrea for filing a false police report.
He was putting her in the back of the police car, arresting her for vandalism, and she was reluctant to get into the car.
She started hitting Officer Beville in the chest. So Andrea Hicks Jackson became aware that Officer Beville was wearing a bulletproof vest.
But a vest can only protect Officer Beville's vital organs.
He tries to put her in the car. He opens the back seat door, and he puts her in the car. When she sits down in the car, she then states to Officer Beville, you made me drop something. I dropped my keys. Officer Beville bent down. He was wearing a ball cap at that time, so his line of sight was obstructed.
You put it on in my case. Make me drop my case. Where your keys?
Andrea aims where there's no protection.
She grabbed her gun and just methodically just shot him. She shot him 4 times in the top of the head. And then the other 2 shots hit, I believe, the collarbone and then part of the chest. It was a brutal execution-style murder. That's the best way to describe it.
You don't survive 5 bullet holes to the head very often. It's a rarity. 1 maybe, not 5.
She was an evil woman, a cold-blooded murder. Andrea Hicks Jackson was the type of woman that was a threat to anybody who crossed her.
Andrea flees the scene. and convinces a friend to take her in.
The friend observes that Andrea Jackson's got blood on her hands and on her body, so they wash her clothes. They then call a cab so that she can get out of town.
Andrea seems to be looking for another victim.
She was in the backseat of the cab and then pulled the gun and tried to rob the cab driver.
Give me your money. What are you doing? I said, give me your money. What are you doing, you crazy?
He managed to get the gun, but then dropped it. She picked it up, and as he fled the scene, she fired a few pot shots at him.
Andrea fires off 2 rounds, but misses. Left on the side of the road, the only thing Andrea can think to do is go back home.
They actually arrested her, and she ended up struggling and fighting with the officers, but they also found the murder weapon.
Andrea's defense for shooting Officer Beville is she didn't want to be manhandled because of her past abuse.
They were trying to say that she was an abused woman and had been abused as a child, and that she was reacting due to this abuse.
But the investigators believe her motivation is much simpler.
Calm down, Ma. Calm down.
I ain't going nowhere.
Andrea Jackson's motive was clear-cut. She did not want to go back to jail. This was a cold-blooded murder, and there's no other way to describe it.
You made me drop my kids.
This was an execution, and she meant to do this.
On February 10th, 1984, the jury decide that she should be executed in return.
The execution of a police officer is the most brutal of all murders.
On appeal, her sentence is commuted to life in prison. Much to the dismay of those who served with Officer Beville.
She should not be in jail. She should be on death row, and by now, almost going on 20 years, she should have been put to death.
The most upsetting part of this case is the fact that Gary Beville is no longer among us. The fact that such an innocent, charming, just thoughtful police officer is not walking among us. How he could have made the difference in so many people's lives.
Society has safeguards to protect our children from predators.
Sometimes there's evil afoot in the world, and I don't know how you predict that.
But how do you protect a child from another child?
This was not a normal teenager. Deep down, she was really dealing with some demons.
Alysa Bustamante is one of the most dangerous teenagers I've ever seen.
Moms lead busy lives and sometimes need an afternoon nap. But 6-year-old Alysa Bustamante's mom isn't sleeping.
Mom, wake up.
She's high on drugs.
At one point, Alysa's mother abandoned her. At another point, Alysa's mother had a drug overdose right in front of her.
She had a very troubled background, very troubled life. Her mother and father both had issues with drugs and drinking.
Some children could witness their mother overdosing and not be damaged by it. Others, it could be very, very traumatic. And it probably was for Alysa.
Alysa's trauma should have ended in 1998, when authorities take her from the family's home outside Jefferson City, Missouri. Alysa moves in with her grandmother for a second chance at life.
And just wait till you see your new room. The grandmother was charged with taking care of Alysa and her brothers and her sister by court order due to issues that Alyssa's mother had over the years.
But Alyssa's problems aren't easily left behind. She is plagued by violent and suicidal thoughts. At age 13, Alysa tries to kill herself with a bottle of pills.
I believe it was a Labor Day weekend where she had taken an overdose. And was found in a bathroom.
Alysa? Alysa! Alysa! Wake up!
And I think that was probably one of the bigger warning signs for her grandmother to try and get more help for her.
Sadly, suicide and suicide attempts are not that unusual among teens. In fact, they are the highest age group for suicides. But 13 is on the young side of that group.
Alysa does get professional help. She's prescribed antidepressants and sees several different therapists. On the surface, Alysa can seem on top of things.
She was a good student, B's and A's, a very bright young woman. And if you just engaged her in face-to-face conversation, you would think, you know, this would be a good choice as a babysitter, for instance. She came across very well.
But what many people can't see is another Alysa, the teenager with morbid fascinations.
There was the other side to her where she could apparently, like flipping a switch, go back and forth between the two.
It was almost like she was leading two different lives. She was able to put on a good front, but inside, evidently something was really building up, really building up.
Alysa starts cutting herself.
The cutting of the skin involves watching the knife pass over the skin, the bleeding, and the pain. And it momentarily distracts the person from the psychic pain they are feeling from their depression or whatever is troubling them. But eventually, their anxiety rises again, their depression becomes deeper, and they feel the need to cut again.
Alyssa's self-harm reaches a dangerous level.
Alysa had over 300 cuts, self-inflicted, on her body, as well as burn marks and bites. Alysa was a very, very disturbed young woman.
Online, bad Alysa starts making public appearances. She lists as her hobbies cutting and killing people.
Teenagers are famous for trying to get attention, but most of them don't say they kill people for fun.
Alysa talks about these dark thoughts with her friends.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to kill someone?
But they don't take her seriously.
I have.
Alysa was not insane, but she was obsessed with killing and hurting other people, and hurting herself as well.
A desire to kill is building inside Alysa.
I'd like to kill her.
All she needs is a victim. For 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton, Alysa doesn't seem at all scary when she plays with Alyssa's half-sister.
Everything I can tell about Elizabeth is that she was a sweet young lady who did relatively well in school. Her classmates seemed to like her. The teachers had good reports. And her mom and her family loved her dearly.
Elizabeth can hardly know she is walking into the fantasy of a very dark mind.
think Alysa chose Elizabeth predominantly because it was a relatively easy target of opportunity. And that's a horrid thing.
One fall afternoon in 2009, Alysa embarks on some homework in the woods behind her house.
She'd been considering killing for some time, and certainly has taken, significant steps towards accomplishing that end.
She has a grave. Now all Alysa needs is a victim. In 2009, 15-year-old St. Martin's, Missouri resident Alysa Bustamante is diagnosed with depression and is showing signs of an antisocial personality.
It means exactly what it says. The individual doesn't like society or people, and these people have no empathy for other human beings.
Alysa harms herself and fantasizes about harming others. Now she sees the chance in her little sister's playmate, 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton.
She had frequently gone to the 5-year-old's residence and played before, so it wasn't a huge issue.
On Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, Alysa seizes her chance.
They were met by the 5-year-old's older sister, Alysa Bustamante. And that's where they separated, and the 5-year-old ended up going home, and Alysa began taking Elizabeth out into the woods, telling that she had a surprise for her.
It was here 6 days earlier. Alysa prepared a shallow grave.
It's getting dark now. I better go home.
Don't you want your surprise?
I believe that Elizabeth trusted Alysa. If she wouldn't have trusted her, I don't think she would have ever gone in the woods with her.
Come on, you're gonna love it.
Okay.
Alysa is armed with a kitchen knife.
Alysa began trying to cut Elizabeth's throat, and Elizabeth reached up and grabbed the knife because there were defensive wounds on the insides of her fingers. And Alysa ends up dropping the knife and beginning to strangle Elizabeth. And according to her statement to us, strangled her until the light went out in her eyes. And then she's down, kneeling across Elizabeth's torso and takes the knife and stabs her, I believe, 8 times. One time sufficiently hard to go through the breastbone, through the top part of the heart, and into the spine.
Alysa demonstrated 3 different styles in her attack: strangulation, slicing her throat, and then multiple stab wounds. She was experimenting.
Alyssa's brutal experiment was years in the making. Years of self-harm, dark fantasies, and mental instability.
It's very rare for even an adult to kill a child. It's even more rare for a 15-year-old girl to kill a 9-year-old. But that's what Alysa did.
Alysa took Elizabeth's body and rolled it into the grave and covered her up, strewn some leaves across it, and went back to her home and cleaned up, put the knife in the dishwasher.
Next, Alysa confides in her diary.
She wrote in her journal, "I did it, I've done it, I can't believe it, what a rush." She was exhilarated, she felt such a euphoric attitude. That was the feeling you got by reading that.
She writes in her diary how much she enjoyed it, and then says, "Oh, I've got to go to church now." laugh out loud. To Alysa, this whole thing was funny.
Meanwhile, Elizabeth's mother is concerned her little girl hasn't returned from the Bustamante house. She calls the police, who start searching the area.
And in fact, Elizabeth was already dead before we were ever notified that she was missing. It was that fast.
Cole County Sheriff Greg White will never forget the case. But little Elizabeth's disappearance isn't a mystery for long. Police simply follow the trail to the last place Elizabeth was seen alive, Alyssa's house.
In the midst of that search of Alyssa's bedroom, found the diary. And one of my investigators was looking through the diary.
Alysa had tried to erase her incriminating diary note by scratching out the words. But good detective work reveals her original thoughts.
And was able to read some of the words through the writing by putting a very strong light source behind it. And at that point, she did confess to it and ultimately take us to the scene of the homicide and to the grave.
The crime is so senseless and cruel, few believe it is even possible.
That there was an audible hush. You know, they just really couldn't believe, nobody could believe that, number one, the child was dead, and number two, that the person that did it was as young as she was. And that just floored so many people, everybody.
Even more tragic, it emerges that just weeks before the killing, clinicians considered committing Alysa to hospital care.
It was determined by a panel of psychiatrists that Alysa should be hospitalized, long-term commitment. That could only happen if Alysa was determined by more than one psychiatrist to be a danger to either herself or to others.
The confirmation didn't come in time to save Elizabeth's life.
That really caused a lot of people to wonder why warning signs or warning bells weren't followed or listened to.
Although just 15 years old and diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, Alysa is tried as a lucid adult.
In this case, it was clearly, coldly planned, calculated, and executed. She executed her neighbor for no reason other than she wanted to see someone die.
Alysa pleads guilty to second-degree murder. She's sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. On the stand, she shows some signs of remorse.
She turned towards Elizabeth's mom and family and apologized and said that if she had to do over, it wouldn't happen. And I know their opinion is that it was not real and it was too little too late.
Incarcerated in a Missouri women's prison, Alyssa's fantasies can no longer harm others, and many believe she should never be released.
Alysa told one of the investigators that she killed Elizabeth because she wanted to see the light in her eyes go out. I hope Alysa never sees the light of day.
When a person cold-bloodedly goes and plans and executes for no other reason they want to see a person die, that person's going to reoffend. I think Alysa is too dangerous to be out of prison.
For some kids, childhood is full of happy memories.
Felicia Morgan's life was a mosaic of terror and tragedy.
Others grow up surrounded by violence.
She'd had a very difficult childhood, the kind of childhood that none of us would want to have or try to survive.
Give me a coat.
And when it's all they know,
it was horrible. That one night, changed so many lives.
It can be dangerous. In the early 1990s in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 17-year-old Felicia Morgan is exposed to more of the bad side of life than most people.
Yo, Felicia, your uncle has been shot. He's been shot.
Several members of Felicia's family are killed on the streets.
She had an uncle who was murdered. She had a cousin who was murdered. Another cousin, I believe, who was shot.
Whoa, can't come through.
I know. I gotta free her.
Dad, get through.
I just want to free her.
That's her family.
She's gotta get through.
By the time Felicia was 17, she had lost more people close to her to gun violence than most soldiers do in a war.
Felicia is also a victim of crime. She's violently mugged for the clothes on her back.
Give me a coat. No.
She was beaten and her jacket was stolen.
She'd had a very difficult childhood, the kind of childhood that none of us would want to have or try to survive. She was internalizing a lot of this chaos and brutality and violence. There was no security for her.
Felicia decides the only way to survive is to turn from victim to victimizer. She starts dishing out what she has received.
That's right.
Crime started out small, shoplifting, car stolen, and then it gets escalated pretty soon. They need more money, and then there's robberies involved, felonies.
Get off your germ! You hurt her. You hurt her.
It's bad.
No.
They swear what happened to them was horrible. They would never do it to anyone, but they end up being a victimizer. They find power in that and comfort.
Living in the same tough area of Milwaukee is Brenda Adams.
We had the all ups and downs that every Afro-American family has one way or another, which consists of some family members being on drugs, family members being incarcerated.
Make a wish, come on.
Brenda has been a troubled teen.
She was placed in a group home because her father was having trouble controlling her behavior.
But by her 17th birthday party, Brenda is back on track with high hopes for the future.
She was a senior at the local high school here. She was on path to graduate. She wanted to go to college.
Brenda and her cousin, Tequila Matthew, both lived with their grandmother.
She was living a teenager's dream. She was happy, lovable, had her whole life ahead of her.
Right on.
Brenda gets one very special birthday gift.
She had received this beautiful leather coat from her sister in Atlanta. And at that time, it was like, whoa, expensive gift like that. Everybody was like, oh, and everybody was happy for it.
The early hours of October 26, 1991. Felicia is driving around the streets of Milwaukee with her two friends.
I want that jacket. Pull over, pull over, pull over.
They were cruising around in a car looking for victims.
Hey, give me the car. Give me.
Felicia and her friends rob 4 people, stealing jewelry, shoes, even a baseball hat.
Things that they saw that they wanted and took.
They leave a trail of destruction in their path.
Those 3 young individuals thought they were invincible. They had gotten away with it a couple times and felt that, hey, this is great. We can get whatever we want, and just by taking it from people.
But tonight, things will get out of control. 17-year-old Brenda Adams is leaving a friend's party.
I remember telling her, I said, well, you can do what you want. I said, but you better make sure you get to work tomorrow. And she had to work early morning. She was working at a fast food restaurant. And she's like, oh, trust me, I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna be there. I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. And that was it. Never knowing that later would never come.
She says goodbye to her friends and waits for the bus.
Brenda ran into bad luck.
Brenda's new coat is keeping her warm, but not for long. Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Give me your coat.
Felicia Morgan grows up the hard way, surrounded by violent crime and murder. But she is no longer a victim. She's become the predator.
Get off your germ! You heard her.
I think it's quite possible Felicia had become numb to violence. When a child is exposed to violence repeatedly, eventually the brain gets used to the horror. Violence becomes common.
Felicia and two friends are cruising the neighborhood, stealing from easy targets.
You know, the person who gets picked to be the victim of a crime happens to be the person that's walking at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what Brenda was doing.
1 a.m., October 26th, 1991.
Oh, that's right. I'm ready.
Felicia and her friends spot 17-year-old Brenda Adams. She is wearing her special birthday present, a brand new leather coat.
Brenda was at the party. She came outside onto the street and ran into these criminals.
Felicia was part of a pack, like a pack of wolves. They were egging each other on.
Felicia and her friend try to take the coat, but Brenda fights back.
Brenda wasn't one that you could just take something from her. And they tried to take the coat. She was a very physical person. I mean, she could hold her on.
Leave her alone! Back off!
They struggled, they fought, and the one girl ended up pulling out the gun and shooting her.
She took full advantage of that gun and used it for its deadly purpose.
Felicia shoots Brenda at point-blank range.
This was really a lucky shot for Felicia. It happened to pierce the subclavian artery. This is approximately 2 to 3 inches from the heart. She would lose consciousness very rapidly. There would be a large amount of blood on her clothing. There would probably be blood on the street underneath her.
But a dying girl doesn't stop Felicia claiming her trophy.
As she lay on the ground bleeding, take the coat off of her, and they drove off and left her there for dead.
That's the most shocking part of this crime,
Oh my God!
is that this young woman lost her life for no good reason because this girl wanted her coat.
I got the jacket!
Just months before, Felicia is beaten up for her coat. Now, she commits the same crime of fashion.
And that act, it was a way of undoing or getting even what was done to her. She went from being powerless to the one with the power.
Please join me, please. My
Shooting a girl doesn't deter Felicia and her friends from hunting for more victims.
Take the coat, and they get back in the car. They still proceed to go on and do 2 more robberies after that.
For Felicia, committing violent acts on other people had become second nature, and it was easy for her to do. She grew up with it.
Felicia isn't on the run long. She tells family members what she's done and is convinced to turn herself into the police the next day. She's still wearing Brenda's blood-stained coat.
I think Felicia wore Brenda's jacket the day after the murder with bloodstains on it because somehow it probably represented a trophy.
Felicia is charged with first-degree intentional murder. Her attorney presents a novel defense that Felicia is suffering from urban psychosis due to her lifelong exposure to violence.
The defense wanted us all to believe that her violent background was causing her to be sick, essentially, to be mentally ill, to be unresponsible for this act.
I don't think Felicia was psychotic. There's no evidence of that, but she certainly was influenced by her environment and the combat that she was exposed to and all the murders and shootings in her family.
I looked at it as her life was not much different than a lot of the inner city lives, or even Brenda's. And she wasn't out killing, robbing.
The jury doesn't buy it either.
Jurors may have sympathy and empathy for what somebody like Felicia goes through that led them to a point of taking another person's life, but they don't want them walking the streets.
On October 29th, 1992, Felicia Morgan is convicted and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 13 years.
It was important to me that she would not be forgotten and that justice would be served, because I loved her so much. I loved her so much.
Felicia is still in the Wisconsin prison system. Her next parole hearing is in November 2012.
She's been in there 20 now. I don't know at what point the parole board is going to say she's ready to come out. I think when they do say that, there may be people who resist that.
I don't think she's an evil person. Do I think she's learned? I think so. From the times that I've spent with her at the parole hearings, I think she's learned. I think she's looked back and regretted that awful night as much as everyone else has.
These deadly women murdered people who never did them any harm. Andrea Hicks Jackson killed a respected policeman she'd called for help. Alysa Bustamante acted out her darkest fantasies on an innocent child. And Felicia Morgan wanted the latest fashion over a life. All three were callous killers. They stole lives for no good reason.